The grand hall of the Valen Palace stretched endlessly, its walls glowing softly with violet light that seemed alive. Crystal pillars rose to the sky, etched with runes older than the stars themselves. Every corner shimmered with alien beauty, yet beneath the splendor was a weight of command and fear. Princess Liara stood in the center, her posture straight, her hands lightly resting on the hilt of a ceremonial dagger. Her mind, however, was heavy. Today she would marry a human, a stranger from a distant world, and her heart was not sure whether to hope or despair. The human had arrived weeks ago, quiet and unremarkable at first glance. He wore simple garments, carried no weapons of note, and spoke only when necessary. The Valen court had whispered about him, fragile, weak, and unworthy. But Liara noticed things others ignored, the way his eyes did not flinch when a guard's blade passed near him. The way his hands never trembled despite the alien pressure. The way his presence seemed calm, even in this intimidating palace. She had watched him in secret, curiosity gnawing at her, and a small, reluctant admiration had begun to grow. The wedding was not for love. It was a treaty. The human king had offered this union to ensure peace between worlds. Liara's father, the Valen king, had demanded it. "You will marry him," the king had said, his voice like iron scraping stone. "You will secure the safety of your people. Your feelings do not matter. Only duty matters." Liara had bowed her head, silent. She had learned long ago that rebellion could be fatal. Her silence was her shield, and duty was her chain. Despite the weight of expectation, she found herself studying her human husband. He stood with an upright calm, a quiet dignity that none of the alien nobles could match. When the ceremony began, alien music echoed through the hall, waves of sound that seemed to tug at the mind. Liara moved with practiced precision through the ritual, but her eyes remained on him. He followed every step flawlessly, no hesitation, no fear. It was not obedience. It was something else. Strength, hidden beneath the calm. The Valen king's gaze fell on the human, sharp as a blade. "Do you understand the weight of this union?" he demanded. The human did not speak. He only bowed respectfully. The court whispered, eyes narrowing, expecting him to falter. But he did not. His silence spoke louder than any words, carrying a strange power that unsettled everyone, even Liara. As the ceremony progressed, Liara felt a flicker of something unfamiliar, a spark of hope. She had never considered a human capable of surviving her world, let alone standing before her father without fear. Yet here he was, quiet but unyielding, a mystery wrapped in stillness. It unsettled the court and intrigued her. Her heart, so often locked behind duty and fear, felt a small shift. When the ceremony ended and the Valen king's eyes bore into him with scrutiny, the human bowed again, perfectly still and silent. No plea, no boast, no sign of weakness. Liara felt a strange warmth in her chest. She realized for the first time that this human might be unlike anyone she had ever known, capable of something the proud Valen had underestimated. In that silent, steady presence, she felt a possibility of something new: trust, respect, perhaps even companionship. As the nobles murmured and the crystal chandeliers shimmered above, Liara followed her new husband from the hall. His calm presence contrasted sharply with the court's whispers and expectations. And in her heart, she made a silent vow not to love blindly, but to watch, to understand, and perhaps to witness the strength hidden in the quiet human she had married. The sun rose over the violet plains surrounding the Valen palace, casting long shadows over alien spires that glittered like frozen fire. Princess Liara walked through the gardens, her mind restless. The human she had married moved silently beside her, as if he belonged to this strange world, yet remained untouched by it. His calmness unnerved her at times. It was not fearlessness, there was something deeper, something like a still river that could hide unimaginable power beneath its surface. Liara had not spoken much to him yet. Words felt unnecessary when his quiet presence said more than speech ever could. Still, curiosity gnawed at her. How could a human survive the subtle dangers of her world? The palace itself tested every guest with its shifting floors, illusions of fire and wind, and corridors that seemed alive. No alien of the court had survived a full day without faltering. Yet the human followed each path without hesitation, stepping as if he had walked these halls his entire life. That afternoon, the first real test came. A messenger arrived from the northern territories, bearing urgent news. Raiders, an alien tribe known for their brutality, were approaching the palace. They had already overrun smaller outposts, and fear spread quickly through the court. Liara's father, the Valen king, summoned the guards, but he did not call the human. Instead, he watched silently, expecting him to panic, to falter in this first real challenge. Liara turned to the human, her heart tight. "We may need to leave," she said, her voice low. She expected confusion, hesitation, even fear. But he only nodded once, eyes steady. "Show me the way," he said softly. His voice was calm, measured, but it carried certainty, a promise that he would not fail. The palace was thrown into chaos. Guards ran to defend gates, and the court scrambled for strategies. Liara felt her pulse racing, yet she could not help glancing at her husband. He moved among the chaos as if it were a quiet room. He assessed the guards, the gates, the vulnerable points of the palace with a single sharp glance. And then, almost imperceptibly, he began issuing commands, small, precise instructions. His words were few, but every motion inspired confidence. Even the skeptical generals obeyed, almost reluctantly, feeling the quiet authority in his presence. When the raiders arrived, they expected easy victory. But the human did not raise a weapon at first. He let the soldiers take their positions, observed the enemy lines, and then acted. With movements swift as thought, he directed the defenses. He pointed to weak walls, shouted warnings at exposed gates, and guided soldiers into flanking positions no alien would have thought to consider. Every action was calculated, yet natural, like breathing. Liara watched in disbelief as the humans and palace guards, under his silent leadership, turned the tide. The raiders faltered, then retreated. The palace, which had seemed so fragile before, now stood unshaken. And all the while, the human had moved calmly among chaos, his face still unreadable, eyes unshaken. He had done what the Valen expected of none. He had survived. He had led. And he had won. After the battle, Liara found him standing alone on the outer walls, watching the retreating raiders. She approached quietly, unsure whether to speak. "You didn't even raise a sword," she said. Her voice was full of awe, and something else she could not name. He turned to her, his expression calm but kind. "Sometimes strength is shown without striking," he said softly. He did not boast. He did not expect praise. And yet, in his silence, he had taught her a lesson more powerful than any sword. A human could be more than fragile, more than weak. Liara felt her heart stir. She realized then that she had underestimated him. This human, silent and unassuming, held a power that no alien court, no court intrigue, and no expectation could touch. And as she looked at him, standing there among the quiet violet winds, she knew the Valen king would tremble when he finally understood what his daughter had married. The palace had quieted after the attack. But the tension in the Valen court had only grown. Whispers swirled among nobles like restless shadows, some admiring the human, others seething with suspicion. Princess Liara moved through the corridors, her thoughts heavy. She had witnessed the human's calm command during the raid, but she knew the Valen king would never see it as triumph. To him, humans were fragile. They were weak. And the idea that one could protect his palace without fear, without even raising a sword, would feel like an insult. That evening, the king summoned them both. The great throne room, with walls of shimmering crystal and floors polished to mirror perfection, was darker than usual. Torches flickered, casting long twisting shadows that made even the statues seem alive. The human stood beside Liara, silent and composed. As the king's eyes bore into him, "You survived," the king said, his voice low and dangerous. "But do not think that impresses me. A human should have crumbled. The palace should have crumbled. And yet here you stand." His sharp gaze flicked to Liara. "Do you see what you have married, daughter? A creature out of place, yet somehow foolishly daring." Liara's heart pounded. She wanted to defend him, but words felt weak, inadequate. The human, however, did not flinch. He remained silent, letting the weight of his presence answer the king's challenge. The king's eyes narrowed. "You did not even fight," he growled. "You let my soldiers do your work. Do you think cunning and silence are enough to survive in my world? In my court?" Still, the human did not speak. Liara noticed a subtle shift, a quiet confidence in his stance, the way his shoulders squared. He did not respond because he did not need to. His silence alone demanded attention. The Valen king had faced the most cunning warriors in the galaxy, yet here was a human who made him hesitate. That hesitation alone was dangerous. Finally, the king's voice rose, echoing off the crystal walls. "You will be tested again. You will face challenges no human has endured. And prove whether you belong here." His tone was a mixture of anger and disbelief. He gestured to a massive holographic map of the Northern Territories. A rebellion is brewing in the mountains. Rebels have already killed 2 governors. I will send my finest warriors, and you will go with them. Let us see if your human mind can survive what my enemies will throw at you. Lyra's pulse quickened. She knew the human had no training in alien warfare, no knowledge of their lands, yet she also knew he would not fail. Something deep inside her stirred pride, mixed with fear. She followed him as he bowed respectfully and accepted the king's order. No hesitation, no complaint. Just steady, unyielding calm. The next morning, the small expedition assembled at the palace gates. The human moved among the soldiers with ease, studying the terrain, noticing weaknesses others had overlooked. Liara walked beside him, marveling at his understanding. He spoke little, but his instructions were precise, his presence commanding. Even the alien soldiers who had laughed at him days before now listened with respect. On the first day of the journey, they encountered rebels in a narrow canyon. The soldiers hesitated, unsure of how to proceed. Lyra's human husband stepped forward, assessing the landscape and the enemy positions with a careful eye. He gestured silently, directing soldiers into ambushes, adjusting strategies faster than anyone could follow. When the battle ended, the rebels had retreated, leaving their leader behind. Lyra looked at him, breathless. You did it again," she whispered. He only nodded, calm as ever. "Strength is not always loud," he said quietly. "Sometimes it is patient. Sometimes it waits for the right moment." Liara realized that her father's doubt, the whispers of the court, even the danger surrounding them, all of it could not touch him. This human was more than the Valen expected, more than they feared. And one day, she knew, the king would tremble before him. The journey through the northern mountains was harsher than anyone had expected. Sharp cliffs rose like jagged teeth, cold winds whipped across the narrow paths, and every shadow seemed alive with danger. Princess Liara wrapped her cloak tightly around her shoulders, yet she could feel the human beside her moving with ease. He walked silently, eyes scanning every ridge, every crack in the stone, as if he could see threats invisible to everyone else. The soldiers grumbled. "A human cannot survive here," one muttered, shaking his head. "He will slow us down." But the human ignored them. His calm, quiet presence inspired something unexpected confidence. The soldiers found themselves following his instructions without question, even when those instructions contradicted everything they had been taught about mountain warfare. As night fell, they made camp near a narrow canyon. The firelight cast strange, flickering shadows on the cliff walls. Liara studied him as he moved among the soldiers, checking their equipment and quietly adjusting their positions. There was no pride in his actions, no need for recognition. Yet every movement exuded control, competence, and an almost invisible authority. Suddenly, a scout ran back, breathless. "Rebels, they are approaching the camp from the cliffs above." Panic spread through the group. Soldiers fumbled with their weapons, some frozen in fear. Liara's heart pounded. They were outnumbered, trapped, and the cliffs gave no room for escape. The human moved forward calmly. He did not shout. He did not panic. Instead, he scanned the terrain, calculating every angle. Then, almost silently, he instructed the soldiers in a series of precise movements. A few would hold the narrow entrance, some would create decoys, and a small team would scale the cliffs to flank the rebels. The plan seemed impossible, yet everyone followed. When the rebels arrived, they expected easy prey. The human waited, watching, letting them come closer before making his move. With strategic precision, the soldiers struck from multiple directions. Confused and outmaneuvered, the rebels fell back. Some surrendered. Others fled, leaving their weapons behind. Not a single life of the humans' group was lost. Liara could hardly believe what she saw. She had watched humans fight before, but never like this. He did not rely on strength alone. He did not rely on fear or intimidation. He relied on patience, understanding, and timing. It was not brute force, it was brilliance disguised as quiet calm. After the battle, they gathered on the cliff's edge, looking down at the scattered rebels below. Liara approached him, her voice trembling with awe. How did you know exactly what to do?" He looked at her, eyes steady and kind. "I watched, I learned, and I waited. Strength is most powerful when it is measured, not rushed." His words were simple, yet carried a weight that resonated deep within her. She realized then that she had never truly seen a human's potential before. Not just his strength, but his mind, his patience, and his courage. For the first time, Liara wondered how the Valen king could ever see him as weak. This human had survived impossible terrain, outsmarted rebels, and kept every soldier alive. And he had done it without arrogance, without cruelty, and without ever raising a sword. As the wind howled around them, Liara felt a warmth she had not expected. She had come to respect him before, admired him quietly, but now she felt something deeper. A bond that was not born from convenience or duty, but from witnessing courage in its purest, most unassuming form. She looked at him, standing there against the twilight sky, a single figure against the vast mountains. "The king will not believe it," she murmured. He turned to her, expression calm but unwavering. "Let him doubt," he said. "Let them all doubt. Strength does not need approval. It only needs to act when necessary." Liara realized then that the man she had married was no ordinary human. He was a force the Valen had never imagined, a presence that could challenge kings without anger, without pride, simply by being. And somewhere deep inside, she knew the day would come when even her father, the Valen king, would tremble before him. The northern pass was alive with tension. Scouts had reported an entire rebel battalion approaching the human-led expedition. The air was thick with anticipation, and the soldiers' nerves were fraying. Princess Liara's hands trembled slightly as she adjusted her cloak, watching her husband move quietly among the soldiers, checking positions and speaking in calm, precise tones. His silence had become a shield, a strange authority that made even the most anxious soldiers steady themselves. Night had fallen, and shadows stretched across the mountains like claws. The rebels struck without warning, a thunder of footsteps and alien cries echoing through the narrow canyon. The soldiers froze for a heartbeat, unsure how to respond. Liara's breath caught. This was more than a skirmish, it was a siege, and the humans were outnumbered. The human remained calm. He did not raise his sword immediately, nor did he shout commands. Instead, he observed, calculating angles, predicting enemy movements. He gestured to a small group of soldiers, signaling them to create traps and barriers. Another group followed him silently as he moved to a higher vantage point, using the terrain as a weapon. Every move was deliberate, every step measured. Liara watched in awe as the human seemed to become one with the battlefield. He anticipated every ambush, every strike, and he positioned his troops to counter the rebels before they even realized they were in danger. When the first wave of attackers reached the canyon, they were met with a perfectly timed counterattack. Walls of fire, strategically placed, blocked their advance. Soldiers hidden in the cliffs rained down projectiles with precision, guided by the humans' hand signals. Chaos erupted among the rebels, who had expected a simple attack. Then came the moment that would change everything. The leader of the rebels, a massive alien known for his ruthlessness, charged forward with a group of elite fighters. Soldiers hesitated, fear gripping them. Liara's heart thudded as she saw her husband step forward. Without a word, he drew his sword. It was simple, human in design, yet it gleamed with a deadly purpose. His movements were fluid, precise, almost like a dance. Each strike neutralized the enemy without wasted motion. The soldiers followed his lead, inspired by his calm and skill. The battle reached its peak, and the rebel leader faced the human directly. For a heartbeat, time seemed to freeze. The alien sneered, confident in his strength. But the human did not flinch. He moved with speed and clarity that seemed impossible. Within moments, the leader was disarmed and pinned, his forces scattered in confusion. The human sword had risen, and the rebel army knew defeat. After the battle, the canyon was quiet except for the labored breaths of soldiers and the distant cries of retreating rebels. Liara approached him, her chest swelling with pride and awe. I have never seen anything like that," she said softly. He turned to her, calm and steady. "I did what was necessary," he said simply, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. There was no arrogance, no boast, only quiet confidence that carried more power than any shout or proclamation. Lyra's mind raced. She had known he was capable, but seeing him rise like this, commanding respect and fear without words, without cruelty, changed everything. He had not only survived, but had outshone every alien warrior in strategy, skill, and leadership. Her admiration deepened into something she could no longer ignore. The human's presence had shifted the entire battlefield, yet the Valen king remained in her thoughts. How could he resist acknowledging such power? How could he continue to see a human as fragile when one had just dominated his fiercest enemies with nothing but intelligence, patience, and skill? Liara knew the day was coming when her father would have no choice but to see the truth. For now, she stood silently beside the human she had married, feeling a mixture of pride, relief, and awe. The rebel threat had been defeated, But something greater had been revealed, the true strength of a human. Hidden in quiet patience, steady resolve, and the courage to rise when the world expected weakness. The Valen King's palace was tense as news of the human's victory reached him. He had expected failure, humiliation, or at least some sign of weakness. Instead, reports described strategy, calm, and absolute control. The idea that a human had led his soldiers to triumph without panic, without error, gnawed at his pride. His daughter, Princess Liara, had seen it. And now he wanted to see it himself. The following day, the king summoned them both to the throne room. Liara followed the human silently, her heart a mixture of anticipation and fear. She had witnessed his strength, but seeing him confront her father would be different. She feared the king's temper, feared the impossible scrutiny that only a ruler like him could deliver. The throne room was vast. Walls etched with glowing runes and floors polished to reflect the faint starlight outside. The Valen King sat upon his throne, expression severe, eyes narrowing as he regarded the human. "You survived," he said, voice cold and deliberate. "You led my soldiers. You defeated my enemies. And yet you sit here quietly as if none of it matters." The human said nothing. His calm was unnerving, like a silent storm gathering strength. He stood tall, his eyes steady, his posture unyielding. Liara could see the tiniest flicker of doubt in her father's gaze. He had faced conquerors, tacticians, and warriors who struck fear into entire planets. And now, here was a human, a creature he had assumed fragile, commanding respect with nothing but presence and skill. "You have no words for what you have done?" the king demanded. His voice was sharp, testing, almost daring the human to speak. "Do you think silence will save you in my world?" The human finally moved, not with arrogance, but with authority. He drew a sword, a simple human design, yet balanced perfectly, gleaming under the crystalline light. He did not raise it in aggression. Instead, he lifted it slowly, pointing toward the ceiling, letting the light reflect across its edge. It was a statement, not a threat. Strength could exist in calm, and it did not need to boast. The king's eyes widened slightly, recognizing the symbolism. In Valen culture, the sword was not just a weapon, it was a declaration of intent and power. By raising it without striking, the human demonstrated mastery that few could match. Whispers rippled through the court as Liara felt her chest swell with pride. She had always known, but now the world, the Valen King himself, could not ignore the truth. "I underestimated you," the king said finally, voice low, almost grudgingly respectful. "No human has ever shown such strength, such control." His eyes flicked to Liara, a question unspoken. She nodded subtly, understanding that her father's awe was mixed with fear. The quiet human beside her had shifted the balance of power in ways words could not capture. The human lowered his sword, calm and composed. "Strength is not measured by noise or fury," he said softly. "It is measured by action, by patience, and by knowing when to rise." His words were simple, yet carried a weight that settled over the court like an unshakable truth. For the first time, the Valen King truly saw him. Not as a fragile human, not as a pawn in diplomacy, but as a force worthy of respect, perhaps even fear. He realized that his daughter had not only married for duty or treaty, she had chosen a partner whose strength could rival any alien warrior, whose mind could outmatch seasoned generals. Liara reached out subtly, touching his arm. His calm glance met hers, and in that moment, no words were needed. She understood fully that he had not fought for glory or recognition. He had fought because it was right. And in doing so, he had shown the true power of humanity. The court remained silent, the weight of the human's presence settling on everyone. Even the king's pride, tempered by years of command, could not resist acknowledging it. The quiet human she had married was no longer just her husband. He was a living declaration that humans could rise above expectation, commanding respect through courage, intelligence, and an unyielding calm. The palace was quiet, yet every corner seemed charged with anticipation. News of the humans' victories and the northern campaign had spread like wildfire. Whispers ran through the Valen court, some in awe, some in disbelief, and some in fear. The Valen king, who had spent centuries ruling with pride and unquestioned authority, now faced a truth he could no longer ignore. His daughter's husband, a human, was no ordinary being. Princess Liara walked through the halls beside him, her fingers brushing his arm for comfort and solidarity. She had witnessed every test, every battle, every moment where the human had faced impossible odds and emerged victorious without arrogance. And yet, despite everything, he remained calm, silent in presence, steady in resolve. That silence, she realized, was louder than any roar, stronger than any display of power the Valen had ever known. The king summoned them once more to the throne room. The air was thick with tension, the noble assembly watching with bated breath. Lyra's heart raced, but she trusted him completely. She had seen his mind, his courage, and his wisdom. She knew now that he carried something far greater than swords or armies. He carried humanity in its finest form. "You have returned," the king said, voice measured but edged with caution. "And yet, I hear of victories I could not have imagined. You lead my soldiers. And you do so without fear, without pride, without even raising your voice." His gaze, sharp and penetrating, fixed on the human. "Tell me, what power is this that defies all I know?" The human did not answer immediately. He moved with calm deliberation, stepping into the center of the room. He raised his sword, not in threat, but in silent demonstration of discipline and mastery. The polished steel reflected the light of the crystal walls, and every noble in the room felt a shift in the atmosphere, a ripple of quiet authority that demanded respect. Lyra stepped forward, standing beside him. "Father," she said softly, "this is the man I married. He is human, yes, but not fragile. He is steady, clever, and strong in ways we could not have imagined. He does not fight for glory. He fights because it is right. He leads because it is needed. And in all that, he is more powerful than any you have ever seen." The king's eyes narrowed, but the edge of doubt had softened into something else: astonishment, then awe. He studied the human, noting the calm in his posture, the precision in his movements, the quiet confidence that needed no acknowledgement. A human, leading my soldiers, surviving my trials, conquering rebels, without fear or error, he muttered. I underestimated you." The human lowered his sword, his voice calm, almost gentle. "Strength is not in words or fury or spectacle," he said. "It is in action, in patience, and in standing when others fall. That is all." A hush fell over the room. Even the most skeptical nobles felt the weight of his truth. The king, once proud and unyielding, realized that the human before him was not just a soldier, not just a husband to his daughter. He was a force that had changed the rules of power itself. He could no longer measure him by alien standards. Lyra reached for his hand, feeling the warmth and strength in it. She smiled softly, proud and relieved. The silent man she had married had become more than she had imagined. He was not only her partner in duty, but her equal in courage, wisdom, and heart. The king finally spoke, voice quiet but sincere. "You have my respect, and perhaps my fear," he admitted. "You are unlike any human I have known. Perhaps unlike any being I have known." He gestured to his daughter. "And Lyra, I see now why you chose him. Not for duty, but for the truth he carries." For the first time, the Valen king trembled not with fear of defeat, but with awe for a quiet human who had done what no one else could. Lyra squeezed her husband's hand, feeling the unspoken bond between them, the trust that had been tested and proven. The human did not raise his voice, did not demand recognition, and did not boast. He merely stood quietly, sword in hand, presence commanding, eyes steady. And in that silence, the king and all who watched understood: humans, underestimated for so long, could rise, could lead, and could inspire awe beyond imagination. The palace was forever changed that day. Not by fire, not by conquest, but by quiet courage, unwavering patience, and the simple, undeniable strength of a human who had married an alien princess and shown the king the true meaning of power.